Chapter 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Early morning in New York, the glow from the Nasdaq sign spills into the British-style cafe. Breaking news: a brutal incident occurred in Germany yesterday, and the Avengers intervened immediately. Tragically, Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, is responsible for nearly 60 casualties due to a misstep, that the news blared from a large screen on the wall. It's outrageous. These so-called superheroes are just using their status to cause trouble, that the well-dressed, bearded owner placed a coffee on a young man's table, scowling at the TV and muttering under his breath. Crew, do you really buy into everything the media feeds you? That without looking up, the young man in the leather armchair casually stirred his Jamaican Blue Mountain with a silver spoon, the rich coffee aroma wafted up, causing a slight smile to play on his lips. Howard, I was there. I saw that green monster smash my house with the car I was still paying off. My dream house, Howard. I saved for over 10 years, Crew's chest puffed out with indignation. He'd witnessed pure despair that day, and the memory still made him tremble. Crew, isn't that the third time you've told me this? And didn't I compensate you with a better house and car? Howard shook his head, adding a sugar cube to his coffee. Every time superhero news came on, Crew launched into an uncontrollable tirade. It's not the same. You can't just go around doing whatever you want, even if you pay for it. Crew planted his hands on his hips, his gray beard quivering with each exhale. Howard set down his coffee. Easy, Crew. Don't jump to conclusions. Let's see how things play out. He knew better than anyone that the Avengers weren't entirely to blame. The media was deliberately fueling public outrage to pressure Tony Stark and the others into agreeing to the government's superhero plan. They wanted the Avengers to be fully government-controlled. Wanda was the one who would suffer the most. He knew all this because he was a time traveler. Howard took a sip, his eyes clouding with memories. He'd arrived in this world a little over a year ago, and he'd gotten the standard time traveler perk, life surprise system. Enjoy life, earn rewards. The system was simple: live well, get bonuses, random rewards like $1 million, unlimited lube, a hard and unbreakable stick. Ding. You've sampled premium Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. Reward, $100,000. Mr. Howard, bullets don't fly for long, believe me. Crew's crisp accent snapped Howard back to reality. We'll see. Time will tell. Howard placed a stack of bills on the table and headed for the door. He paused, turning back. Crew, the coffee was excellent as always. See you tomorrow. The oak door swung shut with a gentle chime of the bell. That kid. Crew watched him through the glass, a smile tugging at his lips as he reluctantly deposited the cash into the register. The young man, charismatic and calm, was his best customer. Every afternoon at 4 p.m., he came in, drank his coffee, and left a $1,000 tip. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the pines. Under the light, the needles looked like they were painted gold. The black Cayenne sped down the road towards the suburbs. Gotta mix things up sometimes. Howard gripped the wheel with his right hand, his left arm resting outside the window, enjoying the breeze. The passing scenery lifted his spirits. He was headed to a manor in the countryside, reward from the system. Secluded, but stunning. As he drove further from the city, the houses thinned out, miles passed with barely a building in sight. The road stretched like a ruler into the woods. The birdsong was loud in the stillness. It's ***Kintiar 3YWAY. It's King of New York looks in for the Queen. You got the right one. A song blared from the Bose speakers. Howard hummed along, tapping his fingers on the wheel. This laid-back life suited him. As he swayed to the music, a woman in a red coat stumbled out of the woods ahead. Shit! Howard's face tightened. He yanked the wheel, slamming on the brakes. The Cayenne screeched to a halt inches from the woman. Bang! She landed hard on the hood. Is she trying to scam me? Howard thought, stunned. Was it the Cayenne or a suction cup? He leaped out, concerned. He stared at the woman sprawled on the hood, blonde hair, spilling out from under her t-shirt. The blood-red coat draped across her only amplified her beauty, and she reeked of malt liquor. Howard gaped. Is that Wanda? Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's actually Wanda. Hod stepped closer. A better look confirmed it. The person sprawled on his hood was indeed Wanda. He never expected to run into the Scarlet Witch way out here. She was lying there, reeking of malt liquor. Even from a distance, he could tell she was hammered. Ugh. How'd you get so wasted? After a moment's hesitation, Hod draped Wanda's arm over his shoulder, trying to help her up. She was limp as a noodle, eyes blurry, the skin around them a little red. Noticing his unfamiliar face, she croaked, Who are you? Miss Maximoff, you've had a bit too much. Hod gripped her wrist to steady her. No. I'm not drunk. She yanked away and nearly face-planted onto the hood. Kneeling there, she shook her head, sobbing, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. You need to rest. Seeing her state, Hod sighed and reached out to assist her again. I know everyone hates me. She looked up suddenly, red-rimmed eyes peering out from under tangled hair, tears streaming down her face. Her voice trembled, filled with helplessness. Seeing her like this, Hod suddenly understood. Recent events must have hit her hard. To prevent even greater loss of life, Wanda had hurled the exploding crossbones into the air. The resulting blast tore through the building, causing numerous casualties. She'd acted to protect people, but instead of gratitude, she faced a firestorm of public criticism. You did the right thing. Nobody hates you. Hod stepped forward, ready to help her up, his voice gentle. Wanda's emotional state was more fragile than that of most superheroes. It was inevitable she'd end up like this. All the online hate had made her question herself. Really? She lifted her head, revealing a deep hollow at the base of her throat. Her top had shifted during the whole ordeal, and cleavage was threatening to make an appearance. Ahem. Hod, being a gentleman, averted his gaze, clearing his throat and touching his nose. It wasn't that he was lecherous, but any guy who couldn't appreciate a beautiful woman was missing out. Are you lying to me? Wanda, sharp even when drunk, noticed his hesitation. Why would you look away if you were telling the truth? He was just trying to make her feel better. No way. Hod said firmly, meeting her eyes. Nobody's perfect. Nobody can control everything. Wanda might be powerful, but that didn't mean she could do the impossible. Even Thanos couldn't always get what he wanted. You're right. She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. She had tried her best, but she never expected. Don't beat yourself up. The ground's cold. Let's get you in the car. Hod reached down to help her to her feet. She nodded slightly, letting him guide her to the back seat. I'll take her back to Avengers HQ. Seeing her slumped against the seat, lost in thought, Hod shook his head. Who would have thought he'd find Wanda like this? As he straightened her legs and was about to close the door, a cold hand grabbed his wrist. What's wrong? He asked, puzzled. What you said, was it true? I'm really not wrong. Hope flickered in her eyes. Since the incident, she'd only faced condemnation. Public outrage and official indifference had left her adrift. That's why she'd come to this remote spot to drink alone, and now, this stranger was cutting through the noise and offering her support. Yes. You did everything you could. Hod said firmly. The next second, she pulled him close, a red glow flaring in her hand. A surge of energy yanked him forward, and he instinctively braced his hands on either side of her shoulders. They tumbled back into the car, faces inches apart, sharing ragged breaths. He caught a heady mix of alcohol, jasmine, and woodsy cologne. Her bright blue eyes held him captive. Hod started to say. Don't. Her eyelashes fluttered, as delicate as flower petals. Hod was stunned. He never saw this coming, and if he didn't understand what Wanda was angling for, he'd been blind for too long. Without hesitation, he kissed her. When they broke apart, a strand of saliva connected their lips. Wanda blinked her wet, sparkling eyes, so vulnerable. Her eyes were still red and alluring. She was nervous, her lips trembling. Turning back now would make him a coward. Bang! Hod gritted his teeth and slammed the car door shut. He'd always lived by a simple rule: never look a gift horse in the mouth. Seeing his actions, Wanda exclaimed, What are you doing? Buckle up. Under the setting sun, the last rays of light warmed the black roof. A black Cayenne demonstrated its superior suspension system. And still, it rocked to the rhythm. Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. -18, -10, +1, -18, I don't know how long it's been, a sliver of dawn peeked over the horizon, cutting through the mist. The sun's up. When's the system gonna hook me up with that titanium alloy kidney? Hodder sat on the hood of the car, cigarette dangling from his lips, a weary smile played on his face, his left hand still trembling as he propped himself up. He fumbled in his pocket for his Zippo, a flame flickered. Hodder would never forget this night. Everything that went down felt like a meteor strike, a freight train roaring through a tunnel, thunder and lightning, even with an unbreakable D_***K, but that kidney wasn't reinforced. Even so, he felt an indescribable joy. Scarlet Witch, damn, so stacked and smooth. Hodder took a long drag and sighed deeply. Just like they say, drive a Cayenne, and girls fall out of the sky, even superheroes. He glanced back through the windshield at the chaotic back seat. Wanda was sprawled out, skin pale and flawless, eyes closed tight. He couldn't tell if she was out cold or just sleeping. A glint of drool sparkled at the corner of her mouth, her hands limp by her sides. Ding. You have deeply understood Scarlet Witch Wanda. Reward, Phoenix Force Fragment, no will. Hodder was enjoying his smoke when the system panel popped up. The sudden appearance of the system panel startled his tired brain. Wait, I actually got a Phoenix Force Fragment. Hodder snapped to attention, stunned. He never expected a reward from this. He figured living it up would eventually pay off, but no matter how much he chased tail, he never got anything. Then bam, this happened, and the reward was insane. The Phoenix Force, no less. What is the Phoenix Force? The Phoenix Force is all-powerful, cosmic. It embodies the raw life force and emotions of the universe. In any universe, the Phoenix Force reigns supreme. The Phoenix is one of the most terrifying entities in the Marvel multiverse. It can cut or regenerate any part of the universe, even wipe it clean, burn away what needs to go. That's the Phoenix's judgment. Some describe the Phoenix Force as the embodiment of all passion. A spark that brings life to the universe, a flame that ultimately destroys it, a phoenix in its prime rivals even the 5 cosmic entities. Even though he only got a fragment, he could still feel a terrifying energy surging through him. Even his body felt cleansed by its power. The next second, a fiery red phoenix materialized in his mind. The moment the image appeared, it slammed into him with overwhelming force. For a moment, it felt like the pressure would crush his very will. Then, just as quickly, the phoenix's phantom vanished. Is that the phoenix's power? Hodder's Adam's apple bobbed, a hint of fear in his voice. For a moment, he thought the phoenix's power would rip his consciousness apart and leave him a vegetable, but luckily, a Phoenix Force without awareness is true Phoenix Force. Otherwise, it would make you lose control of it at any time. Jean is the most typical example. But even she has never possessed the complete power of the Phoenix. And in the movies of his original world, Jean's ability has been greatly weakened. In the end, she was defeated by Wolverine with love plus immortality. Even a fragment of the Phoenix Force gave Hodder sub-god level abilities. Didn't expect to get a reward this good just for a night of fun. Hodder blew a smoke ring, flicked the cigarette butt, and watched the sparks fly. This reward was a total surprise. He'd racked up plenty of rewards before, but they were always basic. Even the self-defense stuff was nothing special, like ultimate fighting master skills, ultimate firearms master, micro pistol, cricket, and so on. Not exactly comparable to the Phoenix Force. What's going on here? Hodder propped his foot on the hood and rested his chin on his hand, thinking hard. He needed to figure out how the system worked. If he could crack the code for getting higher level rewards, he'd be set. Looks? Education? Money? Race? Each idea was quickly discarded. In the past year, he'd been living large. Money wasn't an issue. He'd maxed out all the stats. If that's all it took, he would have triggered something long ago. Wait, an idea sparked. The system reward mechanism might be tied to quality of life. But this time, Wanda and I both got a reward. To collect the fragments, I have to. Just like the many times he rode a big horse to fight, there was no reward effect. Hod looked at Wanda, softly snoring in the back seat. A thoughtful look crossed his face. He hopped off the hood, stretching his shoulders. Guess we'll just have to stick it out together. Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, Wanda woke up in a magnificent room, a painful expression on her face as she bit her lip and opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the dazzling ceiling. Outside the French windows, the midday sun beat down, the smooth floor tiles outside shimmered like lake waves. Ugh, that hurts. A wave of pain washed over her body. It felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Even her mouth ached. Wanda looked around the unfamiliar room, confused. Where am I? She touched her clothes and realized her scarlet battle suit was gone, replaced by a men's shirt that smelled faintly of sandalwood cologne. Her head swam. I went out for drinks yesterday afternoon. But after that, I think I ran into. Ouch, just thinking about it made her dizzy. Wanda struggled to recall the night before. She frowned, realizing her memory stopped right there. The scent of men's cologne coming from the shirt made her guess. Oh, no. The thought made her panic. Combined with the ache in her lower body, she knew what had happened. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the wooden hallway outside. The sound sent Wanda's already frantic mind into overdrive. She dove under the covers, leaving only a small opening. Young, handsome man in a bathrobe walked in, carrying an aluminum tray with buttered toast, fried eggs, and a glass of milk. The aroma of butter wafted through the small opening in the blanket. Hood noticed the bulge in the bed and couldn't help but smile. You awake? He asked softly. Even though they'd only known each other a short time, he knew Wanda hated being covered with blankets. Every time he'd covered her after coming back at noon, she'd kicked it off. He was sure she was awake. Did you do this? Wanda, her face peeking out, puffed out her cheeks. Though her memory was hazy, she vaguely remembered Hood's face from the night before. Yep, all me. Hood's lips curled into a sly grin. Wanda's anger flared, her face turned red. You. Wanda's cheeks puffed with rage, and she threw back the covers. She turned to get out of bed, but a sharp pain shot through her. Ouch! Her face paled as she clutched her abdomen and knelt on the bed, gasping. You okay? Hood quickly set down the breakfast and sat beside her. You went a little wild last night. You must have hurt yourself. After all, they'd been at it from the previous evening until almost noon. It was bound to happen, especially after the experiment he tried this morning. Too bad doing it so frequently seemed to prevent a repeat performance. It was like when he sampled coffee. He could only have 1 cup a day. He guessed it was to keep him from being too greedy. Me? Wanda pointed at herself, furious, spitting out the last word. Wild. She vaguely remembered what happened, but the details were gone. Hearing him say that now only made her feel ashamed and angrier. Does it hurt? Hood ignored her question, looking at her with a concerned expression. He shouldn't have asked. Wanda couldn't hold it in anymore. What do you think? Tears welled in her eyes, her breathing became rapid. It felt like a jackhammer. Of course it hurt. She suspected this guy was a human pile driver. He clearly didn't know what being gentle with a woman meant. Why don't you eat something and get your strength back? Hood pursed his lips, a hint of apology in his voice. It wasn't his idea, but this was the result. The least he could do was be caring and thoughtful. It was one of his best qualities. After all, he reached out to help Wanda. Buzz. Get away from me. A buzzing sound filled the air as a tide of crimson energy burst from Wanda. The furniture around them shook. Wanda's eyes flashed red, and she swung her arms violently. Boom. A crimson beam of rage and heroism shot toward Hood. For a moment, Wanda's eyes softened. The crimson beam softened, too, but the red light was still surging and roaring. Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You little devil. Faced with the wave of scarlet energy rushing toward him, Hood simply raised a hand and flicked it away like it was nothing. What? No way. Wanda's eyes went wide, completely stunned. Even though she'd held back at the last second because of what had happened between them, it still shouldn't have been that easy to block. And the way he did it, it was like he didn't even try. You're being totally unfair. You came on to me. I'm the innocent victim here. You basically stole my innocence. I haven't even asked you to take responsibility, and now you're attacking me. Horde looked totally wronged, covering half his face and whining. Me? Ha! I made the first move. No freaking way. That can't be right. Wanda scoffed, but as she started to argue, the blurry memory started coming back, because in her head, it was her who dragged Horde into the car, and pretty much everything that happened after that was her doing. Instantly, her cheeks flushed, and she felt a hot wave of embarrassment. If only she hadn't downed so much hard liquor. Even though it was my first time, I still want to do the right thing. But after the way you treated me, you gotta take responsibility too. Horde put on his most pitiful face, but in his head, he was thinking, this was actually the first time I've hooked up with a superpowered babe. He'd never had such an awesome experience before. The word that came to mind was smooth. He couldn't help but lick his lips at the thought. I don't believe it was your first time. Wanda rolled her eyes, fighting the rising sensations. She was so frustrated, there was no way someone could be that good at something the first time. Just because it was her first time didn't mean she was stupid. Just thinking about it made her face burn, but more than that, she was just feeling bummed out. First, she was getting trashed by the media because of the Crossbones thing, and now, she just wanted to get drunk and forget about it, and this happened. Her eyes started to glaze over. So you're saying you're not going to take responsibility for me? Horde noticed Wanda's mood shift and kept pushing. Wanda, who was already feeling pretty miserable, snapped out of it when she heard that. She bit her lip, looking conflicted and teary-eyed. She looked embarrassed, which only made her hotter. Fine, Horde joked, then I'll just call Tony Stark right now and tell him what you did to me. Wanda's face went white. If Tony Stark found out about this, she'd be the laughingstock of the whole damn world. Horde was already pulling his phone out of his pocket. Wanda was torn. This was something she'd never be able to forget, but right now, she felt like she had no other choice. She had to wipe his memory. She took a deep breath and cleared her mind, then, she opened her eyes and dove into Horde's mind. Whoosh, a fiery red phoenix was all she saw. Flames blazed into the sky, turning the white clouds into a sea of red. The pressure radiating off the phoenix was intense. This is his inner world. Wanda was blown away. The phoenix looked unbelievably powerful, its destructive aura seemed capable of swallowing everything, but, Wanda actually felt a connection to it, almost like it was comforting. To be honest, after getting so intimate with Horde, she felt a strong sense of familiarity with him. It was like meeting up with a long-lost friend. It made her want to be close to Horde. Did it have something to do with the phoenix? What are you doing? Suddenly, Horde, who was just standing there dazed, reached out and grabbed Wanda's hand. You. Wanda's eyes were wide with shock. This was impossible. Even Thor from Asgard couldn't resist her mind control, and he was just a regular human. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Miss Witch, so you're saying you're irresponsible, but still want to call the shots? Hodder, holding Wanda's small hand, looked at her with a smile, appreciating how she looked in his shirt. There was something undeniably alluring about Wanda in a men's shirt, a real contrast. Have we met somewhere? Wanda's eyes widened, her bright gaze fixed on Hod. For some reason, he felt familiar, and he had powers. Could she have seen him in the Hydra lab? After all, the guy was clearly capable. She racked her brain, but nothing came to mind. Nope. Hod shook his head without hesitating, kneading her skin between his fingers. My dear witch, you can't sweet-talk your way out of this. The moment Wanda probed his mind, the Phoenix Force had automatically flared up, resisting her. The Phoenix Force can resist any kind of psychic attack, and it's one of the 3 oldest energy sources, right up there with Wanda's chaos magic. That's why there was a connection, a feeling of familiarity between them. Wanda looked down, feeling guilty under Hod's persistent gaze. She knew that if she hadn't used chaos magic, none of this would have happened, but take responsibility? No way she was ready for that. Even though she knew she was in the wrong, as Wanda wrestled with what to say, Hod, towering over her at 6'3", suddenly moved closer, almost pressing against her. His sheer presence made her heart race. She looked up nervously. Don't get any ideas. Some thoughts that were best left unthought flitted through her mind. Had it really been that long, that she was thinking these things again? What do you mean, get any ideas? Aren't you supposed to be responsible here? Hod grinned, lowering his head to meet her gaze. Well. Wanda panicked, averting her eyes and stammering, * ding dong. The doorbell rang. Mr. Hodder, Mr. Tony Stark is here, the maid announced from outside. Tony's here. Wanda's mind went blank, and the hairs on her neck stood up. She couldn't imagine what would happen if Tony Stark found out. Hod, seeing her nervous expression, couldn't help but smile. He released her hand and ruffled her hair. Relax, he's here to see me. Hod had gotten a piece of Stark Group a while back through the system. He was a small shareholder, and talked to Tony from time to time. Oh, good. Wanda breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't know why Tony Stark was here, but as long as he wasn't here for her, it was fine. But what Hod said next almost made her cry. Looks like you're in luck. Hodder moved closer, tilting her chin up. You'd better be good. Wouldn't want Tony to find out about this, would you? He had to admit, seeing her frustrated and angry face gave him a strange sense of satisfaction. You. His hot breath on her face. Wanda blinked and bit her lip, not daring to resist. The guy was despicable, with these threats. Knock, 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 star. Mr. Hodder, Mr. Stark is in the reception room on the first floor. The maid's voice came from outside the door. Got it. Hod responded, then turned back to Wanda, fixing her with a stare. My lovely witch, this is your last chance. Or I'm going to Tony and spill the beans. Complain. I should be the one complaining here, right? Wanda's breathing quickened. Her chest was on display, partially unbuttoned, looking particularly alluring. Even though she had been the one to make the first move, he seemed to have taken control, like she was at his mercy. She couldn't understand why he was being so self-righteous. Your call. Hodder gave the Scarlet Witch a lingering look. He felt a weird, thrilling pleasure, knowing who she was. Fine. I get it. Wanda huffed, glanced around, and spotted the money on the bedside table. She scrambled over to the table and grabbed a pen and paper. Turning back, she saw Hod staring at her, his eyes intense. Pervert. Wanda hissed under her breath, then quickly scribbled down a phone number on the paper. Here's my number. Call me if you need anything. Hod pulled out his phone and dialed the number, looking skeptical. You keep digging, pushing, driving like a hammer hitting in my headspace. After the phone on Wanda's desk rang, he hung up, satisfied. Wanda was stunned for a moment, then asked angrily, You still don't trust me? It's my first time, so I've got to be careful. Hodder waved his phone triumphantly. Where are my clothes? Feeling the fabric rubbing against her chest, Wanda pouted and asked. She wanted out of there. They've been washed and are in the closet. You leaving now? Tony's at the door. Hodder smirked, glancing toward the door. I'll go out the window. Wanda pointed to the window. She didn't want Tony to see her like this. The whole team was already in the spotlight. It wouldn't look good if she was caught here, dressed like this. All right, but keep your phone on. Hodder reminded her, standing there, watching her. Turn around. Wanda knew what he was thinking. This is my house, I can remember it. Hodder tapped his temple with his finger. You. Wanda gritted her teeth. Talking to Hod was like dealing with her worst enemy. She waved her hand, and the quilt flew up like a curtain, hiding her as she quickly changed into her red suit. Hod watched as Wanda slipped out the window, acting like a thief. He couldn't help but grin. This is like getting away with something, isn't it? Ding. You and Scarlet Witch Wanda have established a special relationship between man and woman. Get reward, God-level magic talent. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanda's a real lucky charm. The reminder chime was still echoing in his head, and had felt great. That witch is seriously lucky. She's brought him 2 huge wins in a single day. Gotta make it worth her while next time. God-level magic talent, right? It's like he suddenly understands magic on a whole other level. Learning spells should be a breeze from now on. Tap tap tap. Footsteps hurried down the hall. Hood. Tony Stark's voice, a little rough around the edges, called from the doorway. What's taking you so long? You got a date in there. He'd been waiting downstairs for ages, so he decided to check up on him. Maybe, Hood said, swinging the door open and taking a long, satisfied breath. Still a hint of her perfume in here. Some guys have all the luck. Even Tony Stark, who used to be quite the player himself, couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy at Hood's easy life. He's a superhero now, sure, but the weight on his shoulders is heavier than ever, plus, with Pepper in the picture, his days of fooling around are definitely over. Alright, let's head downstairs and talk about it. Hood adjusted his robe and clapped Tony on the shoulder as he headed down the stairs. As Hood walked away, Tony glanced into the messy room, no one in sight, just a shirt tossed on the bed, the curtains fluttered in the breeze from the open window. Tony shook his head and followed Hood to the living room. A gold-trimmed sofa sat on a hand-woven carpet with a classic design. The scent of aromatherapy filled the air. Mr. Stark, can I get you a drink or something? Hood sprawled on the soft sofa, palms up, and asked in a relaxed tone. Booze. Tony hesitated, then shook his head. Just a cup of tea. He needed to stay sharp. Hood signaled to the maid, and soon 2 cups of Earl Grey were placed on the marble table. Never thought I'd see the famous Tony Stark skipping his beauty sleep to visit little old me. After the maid left, Hood shot Tony a teasing look. Tony looked rough lately, dark circles under his eyes. Cut the crap, Hood. Tony forced a weary smile. Sleep's the last thing on my mind right now, let alone sleeping till noon. It had been a long time since he'd had the luxury of sleeping in. The dark circles under his eyes told the whole story. I heard about what happened in Germany. Was just about to come find you, actually. Hood straightened up, his lazy demeanor vanishing. He got straight to the point. Yeah, well, you know Ross, that damn military dinosaur. Tony Stark's jaw tightened. He picked up the teacup and drained it. Now that bastard's the Secretary of State. And he wants, Hood nodded. He'd never liked that guy. If we don't get this situation under control, he's going to put the Avengers under government control. Tony put down his teacup, rubbing his forehead and sighing. He was caught in the middle. No matter which side he took, he was screwed. Ha, Hood scoffed. Like they actually give a damn about that. Those ruthless politicians just want an excuse to control the Avengers. It was all a power play, and it was clear that beyond the public outcry over Wanda, Tony Stark was the one under the most pressure. He was the one who had to fix the mess and deal with the fallout, and Ross had been angling for government oversight of the Avengers for a long time. Tony Stark didn't necessarily disagree, but Steve Rogers and the others were dead set against it, which put Tony in a real bind. Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Those guys are just looking for a way to exploit the Avengers. Tony Stark knew this already. The German incident was just a convenient excuse. The higher-ups have been scheming about how to control the Avengers. Before this, the Avengers were officially part of the organization, but they answered to no one. They made all their own plans and carried them out themselves. This rubbed the higher-ups the wrong way. They felt the Avengers were out of control, and for them, uncontrollable power is simply unacceptable. This incident just handed them a perfect opportunity to act. So, what brings you here this time? Hodder took a sip of tea, looking puzzled. Buddy, I came to vent and see if you had any bright ideas. Tony looked helpless. He knew Hod was sharper than most people, so he was hoping for some fresh perspective. Maybe he'd get a pleasant surprise. Public opinion, Hodder said, pausing. The core issue here is the pressure from the public. If we can shift how people see the Avengers, things will be much smoother. You know public sentiment is against you right now. After all, without some nudging from above, this wouldn't have blown up this big. Yeah, but it's not that simple, Tony said grimly. Turning the tide is going to be tough. He knew it was true, but changing it was the hard part. Hod leaned forward, tapping the table lightly. Actually, the main focus of public anger is Wanda. The Crossbones explosion was the last straw, triggering a massive wave of outrage. If public anger is a powder keg, public opinion is the fuse. You mean, rehabilitate Wanda's image? But Wanda's really unstable right now. She didn't come back to base last night. I'm worried she can't handle the heat. Tony looked thoughtful, voicing his concerns. Hod choked on his Earl Grey, coughing repeatedly. He looked at Tony, a complicated expression on his face, thinking, asterisk, she definitely didn't come back. I was playing poker with her all night, asterisk. You okay? Tony noticed his friend's surprise. Fine, Hod said, wiping his mouth with a tissue. You just need to get people back on Wanda's side, and this whole thing will blow over. Yeah, but Wanda still hasn't mastered her abilities. I'm worried she'll screw up on a mission, and this could break her. Maybe she just needs some time and a little support. Tony had never seen Wanda so lost. Lately, even when he saw her, she always looked miserable. He tried to cheer her up, but it didn't help much. Hod was lost in thought. Maybe he could help Wanda. They'd only met by chance yesterday, and there were a few misunderstandings, but he did get the Phoenix Force fragment and god-level magic talent from her. Besides, Wanda was a treasure trove waiting to be tapped. Buzz star. Tony's watch flashed blue twice. He glanced at it, and his face fell. Thanks for listening, Hod. Steve's been in a foul mood lately, won't even sit down and talk things through. I gotta run, let's catch up soon. Tony sighed and stood up to leave. Hod hadn't offered any specific plan, but Tony felt a little better just talking it out. Sometimes, when you're under pressure, you just need someone to listen, and Hod had always been a good listener. Sure thing. Come by any time. Hodder stood up and said goodbye to Tony before returning to his room. System, open the panel. After sitting back down, Hodder focused his thoughts, and the system's virtual panel appeared before him. God-level magic talent, grants you an extraordinary understanding of magic, eliminating the need to draw magic power from dimensional entities. That simple description was enough to get Hod excited. Wanda, you're a real lucky charm. This is definitely another god-tier reward. Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The god-level magic talent was a huge deal for Horde. Phoenix Force, Chaos Magic, and Fairy Power were all ancient, primo energy sources. They were familiar with each other, and each was perfect for boosting magic. Even a tiny sliver of any of them packed serious power. So, with a god-level magic talent, progress would be off the charts. Horde now had both, god-level talent and Phoenix Force. He was a magic-practicing machine, way beyond Ned Leeds' level, and the craziest part. He didn't need to leech power from other dimensions. In the Marvel Universe, magic wasn't just conjured from nothing, it was borrowed from other dimensions, and that always came with a price. Only Camartage wizards and those who swore allegiance could tap into the magic of the dimensional being Vishanti. Borrowing from Vishanti had minimal downsides, making it white magic. Black magic, on the other hand, demanded a steep price, even your soul. But Horde, he didn't have to pay anything. Hold on. Something's not right. Just as Horde was getting excited, his smile froze. He'd forgotten one critical detail. Even with this god-level talent, I'm screwed. I don't have a spellbook. It was like having a gun with no bullets. Sure, he could use the Phoenix Force to counter Wanda's chaos magic when messing around, but that was just raw power crushing her. He could move the energy, but that was it. Gotta figure something out, he muttered. Horde sat back in his chair, thinking hard. If I remember right, a sanctum is in New York. Specifically, a Camartage temple was right here in Manhattan, and, going by the timeline, future Sorcerer Supreme Dr. Strange was hanging around the sanctum. The sanctum had to have the spellbooks he needed. It wasn't just any temple, it was a major hub. In the Marvel world, it served as Dr. Strange's main residence and base, a place to study magic, conduct research, and protect Earth. Most importantly, it provided a safe haven for Dr. Strange and other Guardians to train and store knowledge, all to shield the world from evil. But how do I get in? Horde stroked his stubble, pondering, didn't they open parts of it to the public? You could buy a ticket for a guided tour. Camartage might not get involved in the world, but they still needed money. Maybe that was his chance to check out the spellbooks. Afternoon found him in front of an old-fashioned building in Manhattan. Alright, everyone, slow down. No need to rush. Line up and follow me in. that the chubby guy leading the way waved a little red flag. He pasted a friendly smile on his face as he ushered people inside. He looked like a tour guide, but his clothes were super basic. They looked like old-school monk robes, a little out of place in modern times, sure, but the welcome to the magic library sign by the door made everything click. So legit. Even the uniforms are on point, that a little girl, holding her mom's hand, exclaimed with wide eyes. The whole place was a thrill for the tourists. They'd never seen a building like this. King. At the back of the line, Horde, dressed in a black tracksuit, eyed the lead tour guide. He hadn't expected the master librarian of Comprehension to personally greet guests. Talk about humbling. King led the group into the temple. The ancient, powerful vibe hit them hard. It was all old European style, topped with a grand ceiling. Around the library, apprentices in monk robes were busy cleaning. Everyone. King stopped and turned to the tourists. You can read the books on the first floor, but be careful not to damage them. Otherwise, you pay. These magic books are just for anyone to read. Horde looked around, surprised, and a bit confused, but then it clicked. Doctor Strange needed a mentor to decipher this stuff. No way regular people could. Plus, the books on the first floor couldn't be that important. They must be basic, otherwise, King wouldn't just say they needed to be paid for if they were damaged. Most of the visitors were just magic fans. With the go-ahead, they scattered, pulling books off the shelves. They were dying to check out these spell books, but most people just skimmed a few pages. They couldn't make heads or tails of it, so they put them back. Horde followed the crowd and stopped at a bookshelf, pulling out a magic book to take a look. King watched quietly, seeing the puzzled faces. He shook his head, disappointed. So few people in the world could truly grasp magic. What's with the look? You expecting a bunch of kids and teenagers to understand ancient texts? A voice broke King's thoughts. The sudden noise made King jump. He turned to see a man in a red cloak standing behind him. The man was tall and thin, maybe in his 30s, with a slightly yellow beard. He looked classically British, even his gestures had an elegance. Stephen. Sneaking up on me again? King complained. He hadn't even noticed Stephen Strange appear. Just checking things out. Dr. Strange gave the crowd a cold look. Even I can't teach myself. Forget about them. His talent gave him the right to be arrogant. He was Ancient One's most promising student. In his opinion, King was wasting time. He had only made rapid progress with guidance. Even with a little magic in their blood, these people wouldn't learn a thing on their own without a mentor. Just looking for talent. King shrugged. It was a long shot, but you never knew. Save your time. Use it to get me a sandwich later. Stephen felt around in his pockets, then paused. Wait, take it out of the sightseeing money. You. Buzz. King was about to reply when a strange noise filled the room. A buzzing sound echoed through the temple. Whoa. Oh my God, what's happening? Look. Magic is real. Mom, this is amazing. I want to learn, too. The visitors were freaking out. They'd never seen anything like this. What's going on? Stephen frowned and looked towards the noise. Then, his blue eyes widened. A brilliant golden light, like a meteor, burst open a circular portal in the air, and standing in front of it, calm as could be, was a young man. It was a dimensional portal. And what really made their jaws drop? He opened it with his bare hands. He hadn't used a sling ring. Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What the heck is going on? Why did a dimensional door just pop up? Stephen stared, his pupils practically vibrating. He was totally fixated on the young guy's hand, because there was no ring on it. He opened a dimensional portal with his bare hands. Has the world gone nuts? Wang, tell me this is a dream. He was seriously wondering if he was still asleep. I mean, the sling ring is what helps wizards focus their magic. Without it, controlling magic is next to impossible. Unless someone has a super deep understanding of magic and a natural gift for it. But, that's just theory. There's no way a person like that actually exists. That's like a magic god. Wang took a long beat before finally saying, "You're not dreaming. He just smacked his own thigh hard, a real magic prodigy just showed up. Wong's eyes were bugging out. He'd only been killing time, you know. That's why he'd run talent checks when escorting tourists, but he never expected to find a magical genius, especially not now. Seeing it happen, his mind went totally blank. He was in shock. The other tourists were gawking at the swirling light show, practically drooling. That's amazing. I didn't know anyone could do that kind of spell. Wait a minute, didn't he come in here with us? He was one of the tourists. I thought these books were just for show, but someone actually learned magic from them. That can't be right. If that's the case, I should be able to do magic right now. Most people just came to the magic library for kicks. They saw the magic books, but didn't take them too seriously. Now, suddenly, someone in their group was doing actual magic, that led to them trying out Horde's actions and trying to cast a spell as well, but they just want to be able to cast magic in this situation. Guess it works on the first try. Hodder glanced at the open dimensional door, a slight twitch in his mouth as he muttered to himself. He just randomly grabbed an ancient magic book, and it happened to have the dimensional door spell. He thought he needed a sling ring to open it. After skimming through the instructions, he gave it a shot. He visualized the opening and just drew a circle with his right hand, and bam! Golden light. He couldn't believe how easy it was. He figured it had to be the magic power inside him, combined with his god-level magic talent. It was a snap. First time. Even though Horde mumbled, Stephen and Wong heard him loud and clear. Stephen, who was struggling to appear calm, almost face-planted. You're telling me you did that on the first try? Stephen remembered grinding day and night under the Ancient One's guidance, putting in a ton of time and effort just to open a dimensional door. He was under constant mental and physical stress, and still, he hadn't succeeded. He ended up getting sent to the snowy mountains and only opened the dimensional door when his back was against the wall. This kid's words were like a dagger, making him question everything. One time. How dare he say something like that? This is the most terrifying prodigy in the world. Unbelievable. Is he the real deal? Wong's Adam's apple bobbed. He gave Stephen a strange look. The Ancient One had called Stephen Strange a once-in-a-century talent. Under her teaching, Stephen Strange proved his talent, but compared to this kid, he was in a completely different league. For a second, he wondered if they had the wrong guy. Maybe this was the one the Supreme Sorcerer was talking about. This is a monster. Wong's been around for centuries, but he'd never seen anything like this. It was beyond shocking, to use a modern word, mind-blowing. Who is this guy? Stephen took a deep breath, his voice a little shaky. His mind raced, but he couldn't place the kid. If this really was his first time, the Ancient One would be considering handing over the Sorcerer Supreme gig to this kid. While they were still reeling, Horde had another idea. He closed the portal. The shimmering golden door winked out of existence. Now, I think it went something like this. Hod frowned, recalling the spell in the magic book. He spread his hands wide. The temperature in the temple plummeted. Blizzard. Hod took a deep breath and said the word. Instantly, a huge golden magic circle appeared above the library. Golden light flashed, blinding everyone. Eyes widened. Whoosh. The next second, snowflakes began to fall. The snowfall intensified into a blizzard in an instant. The swirling snow, driven by gale-force winds, scattered papers and books everywhere. The tourists gasped, their breath clouding in the frigid air. They bent over, struggling against the icy blast. In moments, the indoor temperature dropped from 64 degrees Fahrenheit to 27 degrees F. The entire library was engulfed in a raging snowstorm. Everywhere you looked was pure white.